In those 40 years, the feminine mystique has sometimes been devalued. Friedan the author became inextricably intertwined with Friedan the public figure, the latter often identified with internecine squabbles with other feminist leaders and a combative public persona. In hindsight, the shortcomings of the book become clear. Too much attention is paid to the role of institutions and publications in the reinforcement of female passivity, too little to the role of individual men who have enjoyed the services of a servant class and still resent its loss. Friedan's own revisiting of the material in The Second Stage, 1981, was not as rigorous or well-researched as the feminine mystique had been. While she attempted to make valid points about why some women have chosen to embrace child-rearing and a domestic life, the revisionist message of the second book appeared to be an apologia for the ferocity of her first. Perhaps there also has come to be a certain feeling among the smug overachievers of the post-Mystique generation that time had passed and passed the book by, that we had moved away from the primer into the advanced course in seizing control of our own lives. I plead guilty on this count. I expected to revisit this book as I would a period piece, interesting, worthy of notice and of homage, yet a little dated and obvious as well. The daughter of a quiet and contained housewife, I had become an opinion columnist in the onslaught of change that this book began, and I expected to be properly grateful, which is to say, slightly condescending. As casually as I once cracked those painstakingly painted eggs as a girl, I cracked the spine of this book, and as my mother had been in a different world at a different time, under hugely different circumstances, I was enwrapped. 4 decades later, millions of individual transformations later, there is still so much to learn from this book about how sex and home and work and norms are used to twist the lives of women into weird and unnatural shapes. It set off a social and political explosion, yet it also speaks to the incomplete rebuilding of the leveled landscape. Giving a name to the problem that had no name was the necessary first step, Friedan concludes in the epilogue. But it wasn't enough. Much, much more was necessary to change our lives. But as a first step, this one is extraordinary. As a writer, I say, brava. As a beneficiary of the greatest social revolution in 20th century America, the resurgence of feminism that began with the feminine mystique, I am obliged to add, many, many thanks. Metamorphosis, 2 generations later. As we approach a new century and a new millennium, it's the men who have to break through to a new way of thinking about themselves and society. Too bad the women can't do it for them or go much further without them, because it's awesome to consider how women have changed the very possibilities of our lives and are changing the values of every part of our society since we broke through the feminine mystique only 2 generations ago. But it can't go on in terms of women alone. There's a new urgency coming from the changing situation of men, threatening to women unless men break through. Will women be forced to retreat from their empowered personhood, or will they join with men again in some new vision of human possibility, changing the man's world which they fought so hard to enter? Consider the terms of women's new empowerment, the startling changes since that time I wrote about only 3 decades ago, when women were defined only in sexual relation to men, man's wife, sex object, mother, housewife, and never as persons defining themselves by their own actions in society. That image, which I called the feminine mystique, was so pervasive, coming at us from the women's magazines, the movies, the television commercials, all the mass media and the textbooks of psychology and sociology, that each woman thought she was alone. It was her personal guilt if she didn't have an orgasm waxing the family room floor. No matter how much she had wanted that husband, those children, that split-level suburban house, and all the appliances thereof, which were supposed to be the limits of women's dreams in those years after World War II, she sometimes felt a longing for something more. I called it the problem that had no name, because women were blamed then for a lot of problems. Not getting the kitchen sink wide enough, not pressing the husband's shirt smooth enough, the children's bedwetting, the husband's ulcers, their own lack of orgasm.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.